Welcome back to the home of the world-building shrimp. Let's talk about inventories. In basically every game you ever play, you have an inventory, a place to store the many items you collect during gameplay. Something most inventories have in common is that you won't see the many things in their possession displayed on their body. Each game approaches inventories a little differently. A game like Zelda Breath of the Wild limits the amount of weapons you can carry, but allows you to have hundreds of bugs, rocks, and apples in your pocket. Skyrim gives you a carry weight limit that you can increase through options like stamina upgrades or enchanting items. Games give you limitations, but usually those limitations aren't determined by what is the most realistic, because carrying around dozens of potions, multiple weapons, hundreds of plants, some dragon bones, and 900 arrows will never be called realistic. We don't often get any in-universe explanation for why an inventory works the way that it does. We just accept it, because it's more fun to just pick up every item you see and not worry about how many you could actually fit into your backpack, let alone how food doesn't just rot in there. When I play Genshin and someone requests some pieces of raw meat and I hand over one of the many hundreds of pieces I have in my inventory, I shudder a little, because I know I've had those in there for over 4 years. I've actually had this idea since 2017. So let's talk about the mavvada. A mavvada is an extra-dimensional pocket connected to an object, a specific place, or a person via a fold. The fold is like a door, or a window. I don't know which description is better. Because this video is so long, I'm going to give a bit of a preview on the topics. First, an explanation of Etherin, my secondary dimension, basically the source of all magic. Then the explanation of the mavvada and several important magical processes called threshold, potential, and endurement. We'll talk of the dangers of using this storage space, the different kinds of mavvada, what can happen when it runs out of energy, and who can have one. This pocket exists within Etherin, the other dimension of my world building. It's been mentioned a bit before, but we'll have to go on a little detour from inventories to get a more thorough explanation, as the way that Etherin works is pretty integral to the way the mavvada works. This dimension is one of chaos. That word gets used pretty freely in fantasy settings, so its meaning may be kind of skewed from the original. And mine is too. Here is my definition. Chaos is defined by an infinite amount of potential. Chaos is everything, everywhere, all at once. Chaos is the manifestation of all essence happening simultaneously. Each instance of chaos is made up of different mixtures of everything that has ever happened or could happen. It's the culmination of entire realities without any timeline. This chaos is also the fuel of magic called ether. This chaos has infinite potential for creation, but also for destruction. Left on its own, things that are created from this ether are subsequently destroyed. Now, this video isn't about ether in itself, so I'll just give a brief explanation for how Etherin is a dimension of pockets and not just infinite chaos. This kind of dimension is one of potential. Ether is potential. The pockets of Etherin were initially maintained by the first Numenon, basically a deity known as the Whispers of Etherin or as the Seamstress. With her help and guidance, the energy of potential can be guided into pockets of order. The chaos can be held at bay, turning into walls that keep order within and ether out. Maintaining these walls has a cost. It requires the utilization of ether itself. So while it may seem like you'd have an infinite supply of magical energy because Etherin is made out of ether, that's not the case. Ether has a cost to use. It must be filtered and directed in order to be controlled, and this filtering process exposes the mind and body to its effects. Every living thing has a threshold of how much exposure they can handle, and if you go past that, the body and mind are damaged. Now back to the mavvada. A mavvada is a small pocket of Etherin that is connected to a specific person, place, or thing. While the mavvada is an incredibly convenient place to store anything you might want to, it has a cost. Whether or not the mavvada is holding anything, it siphons energy from its connection point. The more that is stored within the space, the more energy it needs to maintain it. Every time you open the fold, that action requires energy. The fold is like a rubber band being stretched. The further it is pulled, the more ether is needed to maintain the opening. While closed, the fold doesn't require any energy. But the walls of the mavvada itself do. If energy isn't used to keep the chaos in check, the walls will close in on your possessions and tear them apart. Having a mavvada is a great convenience, but also an inconvenience. Having a constant drain on your resources is a pretty big deal. Remember that threshold thing I mentioned earlier? It's the amount of magic you can use before you sustain lasting damage to your body and mind. You can only use a specific amount of magic before you can't use any more within that time period. This is called potential. You have a certain amount of potential energy you can utilize before you hit your threshold. Having a mavvada drains potential constantly, even as that potential refreshes with time. Think of it kind of like a debuff in a video game. You will never be able to completely refill your mana bar because there's always a drain on it. Or for those who don't get a video game analogy, perhaps an example of a water bucket with a hole in the bottom. It is always being refilled by a small trickle of water throughout the day, but it's also always draining out of the hole. The more you put into the mavvada, the larger the hole that drains out the water. For the average person, that trade is well worthwhile. It's an expense they accept. They don't need to save all their potential for just-in-case scenarios when their days are usually the same. But there's also another mechanic that can make this cost less impactful over time. The more magic you use or are exposed to, the further you can push your threshold. It doesn't happen overnight, and in truth, the best way to further your threshold is to carefully surpass it, opening yourself to the danger of overuse, but reaping the benefit after healing that damage and being stronger than before. It is not a safe method, but it is efficient. Still, improvement takes months to years. Pushing the threshold means you have more potential to use. Then we have the process of endurement. The more you use that mavvada, the less its cost affects you. It doesn't cost any less magic, but it affects you less, and so you have more magical room to work with. If that didn't click, which it took a while for me to wrap my head around it too, I'll compare it to video games again, where you have a health bar and a mana bar. Over that health bar is a shield bar, and this represents your potential. The shield is how much magic you can use or be exposed to without actually taking damage. Endurement towards a type of magic means your shield takes less damage when using that magic, while you're still using the same amount of mana. You use less of your potential when you're further inured to that magic. This is the same with any kind of magic use. The more that you use it or are exposed to it, the more you're inured to its specific effects. Each type of magic has a specific numen that goes with it. Each numen needs to be inured separately, but in this case, as ether is all numen all at once, inurement to ether helps a little with inurement to the others. But we're still talking about cost, so here's another one. When you are reaching through the fold, you're exposed to the raw energy of Etherin from the outer edges. This has the same effect on your potential as using magic. On the topic of the fold and its dangers, I need to mention what happens when it closes. The edges of a fold are reality closing in on itself. If it closes on anything, it goes through it. If you reach into your mavvada and your control over the fold wavers, it will snap shut, and your hand is now another object stored inside of Etherin. It can be reattached if you get a healer's aid, but best to avoid the scenario if possible. There are some specific wards against a fold closing, but they are specific and costly. If you saw the previous video on sea monsters, this may sound familiar to the Ekosh in the lure slug's throat, and it is. The Ekosh is a mavvada. The only difference is it's called an Ekosh when it is internal, and a mavvada when it is external. There are more dangers, drawbacks, and costs to mavvada, but they differ between the different types. The major differences between mavvada is what happens when the fold closes between realms. Some mavvada void all the air inside and vacuum seal, shrink wrapping around the contents so that it is as small as possible, and thereby cost less to maintain. Put a big, fluffy pillow inside and it'll take all the air out and leave you with a flat plank instead. You can use a mavvada to store food and keep it fresh for much longer. To make it even more effective, you can also store a cold ETH key inside, turning the space into a vacuumed fridge. Do things that are vacuum sealed benefit from cold too? I think so. What not to put into this kind of mavvada? A fluffy cake. All the air is removed and fluffy cake is now sad flat cake. Any living thing that requires oxygen, they'll die the moment the fold closes, as all oxygen voids the space, including that living thing's lungs. These mavvada should not ever store living things, if you want them to stay that way. Another type of mavvada doesn't fully close unless specifically held closed, so it always has air. This costs more energy not just because the fold never closes, but because the walls do not shrink wrap around its contents. The advantage to this fold is that you can store living things within them. The disadvantage, it can fill with water if you don't manually hold it closed. There are even mavvada that forego the natural processes of time, where time moves faster or slower within. Now, I generally dislike time magic, but really only when it comes to timelines. It's not time travel. Nothing is changing timelines here. It's time alteration. So for a little sneak peek into why I made time altering mavvada, it was because of shapeshifters. For my hard magic shapeshifters, I wanted there to be a logical way that someone could physically shift into another form. And I wanted that to be because it took a lot of time. I settled on the process of the caterpillar into the butterfly, shrouding yourself into a cocoon, dissolving into goo, and then reforming into something new. This takes time. For little caterpillars, it takes weeks. For a human body turning into something else? How long would that take? It's hardly practical for someone to take a month to shapeshift. You'd need to plan it out really carefully, unless you could circumvent that time. Take the time needed and still be done in an instant. This is where time-altering mavvada come in, and why I find them so interesting. Who wouldn't want a month-long process to be over in the blink of an eye? Hop in the mavvada and take all the time you need to transform, then emerge as though no time has passed. Heal from your injuries that would normally take weeks, but instead just a few lapses in the mavvada. But you are still experiencing the time taken. You still live those weeks it takes to heal. Alone in the mavvada, left with your necessities of air, food, and water. While it is instant to those outside, you leave your mavvada having lived that time. You are 1 month older than those left outside. Someone who shapeshifts regularly using this method ages far faster than those who do not. A child could outage their parents. There are so many applications to this, it could be its own video someday. I hope you like the potential of time mavvada as much as I do, but time to move on. We mentioned briefly what happens if the mavvada stops receiving energy. This can happen if it's purposefully cut off, someone blocks magical energy, or the owner of the mavvada dies. When the mavvada stops receiving energy, the walls will stop being maintained, and so the walls can close in on the things inside. The chaos of Etherin devours whatever is inside until there is nothing left. The rate at which this happens will vary, somewhat by chance, because chaos, but also because of the type of material it is eating through. Paper, for instance, is very easy to disassemble, while something like metal would take a while longer. Eventually, the mavvada will eat through everything and close entirely, ceasing to exist. Things destroyed by the walls of Etherin cannot be recovered. But there are ways to ensure the items inside have a chance to be removed. There is magic that can be woven into a mavvada that stores excess energy into it, and this slows down the deconstruction process so that the contents can be rescued by either yourself or an etheric mage. This is done when many important or valuable things are stored within. But you can also enchant something to resist Etherin for longer than it otherwise could, by imbuing energy into it specifically so that the required energy input is only for one object rather than the whole space. When a body dies, it still has residual magical energy, so the connection point doesn't immediately break. It only breaks when the body runs out of magic. This means you can bring a body to its final resting place and have the fold come with it. But if you get there too late, the body will have lost its connection to the fold. You could continue to pour numen into the body to maintain this connection, but this only works temporarily. It's believed that even after the body dies, the soul is still connected to the flesh as long as there's magical energy for it to feed on. The soul might remain, but the consciousness fades quickly. A soul is kind of like a flame. If it's on top of the wood, it's good, but take it away from the wood, it'll die. The wood is a source of energy. Take the soul away from the energy source, and it will flicker away into nothing. So, with all this information, who can have a mavvada? Mavvada are genetic. If one parent has it, the child has a chance to have one too. If both do, then the child will. With everything previously discussed about how energy is needed for maintaining a mavvada, how could a child maintain one? The connection point does require energy from the get-go, but it doesn't take that much. This is covered by latent energy taken in by all living things. As the child grows up, they can be taught how to utilize their mavvada. It's a dangerous process to learn, and as they begin to learn, it's common practice to not use your hand to reach in and out, instead using tools. And whatever they store must be small. Once enough experience and endurement is gained, the mavvada can be used more and more. A mavvada can also be gained through magical means. Etheric mages can create and attach a mavvada to someone or something. Eth key can be enchanted with a mavvada. The mavvada is connected to the eth key and not a person. This means it is less secure, as anyone who holds it can access the space, but that can also be useful, as the mavvada can be passed easily between different people. However, an eth key requires more upkeep than a mavvada connected directly to a person. It still needs energy to be provided, and the enchantment will also erode with use. It must be maintained in order to not lose access to the mavvada. If the enchantment wears out before it can be renewed, then the mavvada will be left in the area it was when the enchant ended. The mavvada will stay disconnected even if the enchantment is renewed. It must be emptied with the help of an etheric mage, or the pocket will collapse over time and everything will be lost. What are etheric mages? They are people with talents in the domain of ether. They can create mavvada as well as access them, whether they belong to someone already or not. The domain of ether also contains Mano magic, enchanting, and fold magic. The reason I made etheric mages was because I loved the idea of mavvada raiders. Can you imagine killing a giant monster and, after such a feat, be able to raid its inventory of treasures, vanquishing a foe and getting the spoils of war? While in-universe, that doesn't really apply very often, since a monster's eco rarely has anything nice inside, unless you want pieces of their previous meals, which, ew. The only times you'd get to raid an inventory of a monster is if that monster has a penchant for collecting valuables. One example of this is the unsouled dragons. They have a proclivity for collecting eth key of any kind, though they best know how to utilize elemental type enchantments. If you were battling a person though, that mavvada could have many cool things inside to make the effort worthwhile. Now that we've talked a bit about etheric magic, I can introduce another concept: creating more than one entrance to the same mavvada. Whether you have this done for you or do it yourself, it is an incredibly useful tool. By linking a mavvada to more than one person, the maintenance of said system can be split between more than one source. Apart from splitting costs, there is also the convenience. Partners could access the same money, share things between long distances, or even speak across fold entrances. You could pass letters and even jump through the fold to join someone on their side. But this is only a one-way trip, since your mavvada entrance will come with you to the other side. Now, we finally reached the end of the video. For closing, I'll do my best to recap. The mavvada is an extra-dimensional storage pocket. The amount you store correlates to the amount of energy it costs to maintain. As you continue to use it, the cost becomes less of a strain. Stop providing energy and the mavvada will close on your belongings, deleting them from existence. The uses of mavvada vary from the mundane day-to-day to the querying of confidential information to the time alteration needed for instant shapeshifting. That's all I have on my inventories for now. I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. It feels amazing to have this all written up and existing. How do I even follow this up? That's Future Shrimp's problem. Future Shrimp thinks dungeons might be the next topic, though it may take too long like this one did, so maybe I'll do something smaller in between. Remember to drink your water and go outside if you can. It helps your brain a lot.